Cubs fans, pitchers and catchers report next week to spring training. We've got Michael Cerami from Bleacher Nation to talk about all the top questions, all the top storylines right now here live answering your questions on the Setup Man. Let's get to it. Happy Monday morning, and I expect there to be maybe a little bit of some weekend hangover and maybe not a ton of people on the live here, but those that do show up, we want you to ask your questions to Michael, and let's get them all out there. First of all, Michael, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on becoming a children's author. That's super cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me. First of all, I got to say, the production value of this podcast far exceeds our podcast. There's music and graphics. Beautiful. Love it.
I saw you dancing in the background there.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone could see me backstage, but I was like, oh, this is nice. We got to add some of that. Thank you on the book. I'm very, very excited about it. It's been something I've been working on for over a year. It takes a really long time to put together. I kind of underestimated that. I wrote it quickly and then was surprised that the illustrations and the production and then planning out the sale and the time, all of that took a lot of time. So we're finally here. I think we got lucky because it's a pretty exciting offseason and a pretty exciting year for the Cubs. Should be some good vibes, and maybe a couple more people want to buy, a book for the kids of their life.
Absolutely. It's called My First Trip to the Bleachers, and the link is in the description below for those of you that are watching live or watching on replay or listening in the audio podcast. Please go get your copy. Really quick, Michael, what is your favorite page in this book, if you could pick just one?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff for true Cubs fans to sort of recognize. There's some hidden little Easter eggs for people, for the grownups that are reading the book. I think my favorite page though is after the little boy, who's based on my son, goes and gets some treats and a drink. He has to pee, so he goes to the bathroom and is disgusted by the troughs. Yeah, and it's just it was one of those things where most of this is based on my experience as a parent taking him. But I remember going to Wrigley for the first time and being young, and the intimidation factor of just being I got to go stand next to these guys and pee in this disgusting shared sink, which I love, in retrospect.
Today, yes.
So that's probably one of my favorite pages in the book.
That's awesome. Hey, I got to give you some flowers. You have been doing a great job with Bleacher Nation, along with Brett Taylor for a long time, but it feels like this offseason you become a little bit more of a celebrity just because you've been the first to break some pretty major news, including the Edward Cabrera trade. What was that day like for you? Take me through it.
Oh man, that was one of the most stressful. So I've broken some stories, over the years, but you're right. I've increased that a little bit this offseason, and that was on purpose. So I occasionally hear things, as people know, and I try to be and I've tried, especially in the past, to be very limited with what I'm sharing. A lot of times it just helps inform my takes and just sort of learning things on background. This offseason, I was starting to decide that, no, I think I'm going to try to break some of these stories myself. That one was a really stressful one because a similar source a week or two before that had heard that the Cubs were signing Tetsuya Mai. And and it was, I talked about this on my pod once, and I always have to double check. If I sound like I'm stuttering, it's because I'm okay, I got to make sure I'm not oversharing here.
For sure.
But there was a lot of people behind the scenes, let's just say that, on New Year's Eve night who thought the Cubs were about to get a Mai.
Wow.
I was close to reporting it I was trying to track down some additional confirmation. And then it didn't end up happening, obviously. For whatever reason. I mean, we talked about it in the past, there might've been some Boris shenanigans there or whatever. But then the following week, one of the sources that I've been talking to gave me the Edward Cabrera trade. And I did my, little feelers out there, and I got some positive feedback that it was done, but nothing as definitive as what I had originally heard. So I double checked some other sources, found out that it was going down. And so I tweeted out there. Right. And the next 30 minutes or so was I was basically shaking because you're just out on a limb
Yeah.
waiting for anybody to confirm it. And if you recall, although the confirmations of what I had been hearing, that they were finalizing a deal, came about 30-45 minutes after, it wasn't until the afternoon, many hours later, that Jeff Passan dropped the, yeah, it's actually officially done, report out there. So I was confident and I was ultimately right. It's just that the process of finalizing those medicals and informing all the players
Sure.
took an
Sure.
extremely long time. And that just really left me out there to drive.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this needs to be over. Like,
Yeah.
it consumes your whole day then for someone like me. I'm sure for the Jeff Passons of the world, they're like, whatever, I do it 10 times a day. So good for them. But for me, it was still very nerve wracking.
That's exactly why I love what I do with podcasting and do not want to be a reporter, because God, that just sounds so stressful.
No, it's
But
terrible.
no, appreciate all the work, man. And I know in at least this live, we've got a lot of people that are fans of yours. We've already got the questions flowing in, and I want to make sure that in this limited amount of time that we have here, about 30 minutes, that we get to some of the top stories, but also get some time for some fan questions. So guys, if you're watching right now, I know it's a Monday morning. A lot of you probably at work, probably not in the Cubs mode, but share this, send it to a friend. Let's get some more people in here. Let's get some questions going. First of all, let's just open-ended for you start this off with, what's the number one or maybe top 2 or 3 things that you're going into spring training with pitchers and catchers reporting next? What is it? It's the 11th, whatever day that falls on. I think that's a Wednesday. What are the things that you're paying attention to the most?
Sure. Well, so I think I would have answered this question differently before last spring training, but I
Mhm.
learned a pretty important lesson last year, which is going to sound obvious to some people, but because it's always sort of the case that we're trying our best to understand which players are at what point in their journey. But last spring, I remember Brett Taylor, who's the lead Cubs writer over at Bleacher Nation, really early on identified Brad Keller, who had come in on a minor league deal, identified the playing up of his stuff, the velocity, the movement, just how good he looked. And I remember sort of discounting both Brad and Brett at the time, not because I don't believe in those sort of deals. I think those are obviously have worked out very well for the Cubs, but I just didn't know how, I didn't fully appreciate how much stock I should have been putting into it at the time. And Brett, by contrast, was like, no, are you seeing Brad Keller? Are you seeing? He kept reiterating it. And then, of course, Brad Keller went on to have an incredible season for the Cubs, their best reliever, arguably, for the entire year. And so I think heading into this spring, I'm going to be looking at, especially because we have so many new relievers in the org, the relievers that the Cubs have brought in and just seeing how they look. If anything about them passes the eye test for, this is a little bit better than I expected, or that pitch is standing out, that velocity is a little hotter than when we thought. And I'm just going to call it the Brad Keller lesson from last year, because again, Brett was on that from day one, and I did not jump on the bandwagon early enough.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up the 40 man right now and just talk about some of these guys. But I share this story. I know a lot of our audience has understood this, but we had Tyler Zombro on last year, and we got him literally like on the day that they were signing Brad Keller. And he said to me before we went live, he's like, "Hey, Brad Keller, huh?" And I was like, "Who's that? What are you talking about?" Because it hadn't broken yet. He's like, "Oh, never mind. Sorry. It's like it's gonna hit the news." I'm like, "Yeah, but really, who is that?" and when we went into the conversation, I asked him who's the number one new Cub that's going to make the biggest impact out of the bullpen. And he wanted to say Brad Keller, but he couldn't because it wasn't released yet. But he said Caleb Thielbar. And I was like, dude, you nailed it.
Yeah,
geez.
Absolutely. Turns out he knows what he's talking about. Yeah, get him back on the pod. Let's see who he's got for this year.
I know. We're trying. He's busy with all these promotions that he's getting.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some of the new guys. I mean, you got Maton. You've got Holby Milner. You've got, and I apologize if I missed anyone. Some of these other guys that are coming like from Tread and the Ryan Rollison, Jacob Webb.
Hunter Harvey.
Hunter Harvey. Thank you. There's a number of different guys. So, I mean, I guess based on the information you've seen, we know about the major league guys because we can look them up on Baseball Reference. We can see their stuff on Baseball Savant, all that good stuff. But have you seen anyone that has been one of these like Tread Athletics / minor league invite that you're just kind of like, okay, maybe that could be the Brad Keller for this year?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, I know which names we're talking about, but I don't know enough about those guys until they show up. And then I start diving in a little bit more, but I will say like, the Ethan Roberts of the world and the Luke Little, Jack Neely, some of these guys that have, been around, have the upside, have the potential, but just haven't quite gotten over that hump yet. Really, really eager to see if one of them can, because, Luke Little, all the promise in the world, just hasn't quite put it together yet. But you're like, I could see it. I can obviously see it. And you would hate for, him to be Jeremiah Estrada and shipped off and then blossom elsewhere. It happens. And the Cubs are the beneficiary of that on the other side plenty of times. But those are the sort of guys where you're like, when there's stuff there and you're just a reliever and it's like, is this going to be the year where he has his great season? And it doesn't have to stick forever. We've seen Porter Hodge come up and have a great season. And then, someone like that is going to have a great year. And it's going to be Jack Neely, Ethan Roberts, Luke Little, maybe Porter Hodge.
Nice little mention here from Rojo Cube. Phil Maton, I think, is a sneaky good signing. He shares a birthday with PCA as well. Didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of these guys that we forget about, and then they come in and they have a good season. To your point, it's just going to be crowded. It's going to be really difficult to see where those guys still get their opportunities. But you can't forget about the year Porter Hodge had a couple years ago. You can't forget about the year Ben Brown had a couple years ago. And you can't forget about the fact that a lot of these guys are going to need to play roles. Ethan Roberts, how many times was he on the roster this last year? And we really weren't talking about him going into spring training. So I think for me, though, man, I am so anxious and excited to see the progression of Justin Steele. I think that's got to be my top one. Him already throwing bullpens and like posting about it on Twitter is just, to me, such a good sign that we are talking about May. And I still think May is optimistic, but I mean, gosh, wouldn't it be crazy if he actually like got into a spring training game this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that would have been my number 2, and I have a number 3 for you. But I want to add that for Justin Steele, the thing that I'm obviously eager to get him back. Like I can't wait till Justin Steele's back. But I do think that there's another sort of side benefit to slow playing his reintroduction, and that's sort of saving it. I'm all over this year. The way the Dodgers used their rotation last year, limiting Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, Shohei Ohtani in the first half, and then unleashing them on the entire league in the second half and in the playoffs. I think Justin Steele will sort of benefit from that as well. And the Cubs have, with him 6, established starting pitchers plus all of their depth, which is pretty good. I really don't mind that he won't be pitching for the first couple months because I believe in the overall Cubs roster enough to know that shouldn't sink them, because I think that when he does return, he could then probably give someone some time off, whether they're actually fully injured. And I don't mean a phantom injury, but some rest. I mean, we got guys like Edward Cabrera, who's not ever thrown more than 100 innings until this last year, never topped 140. Shota Imanaga, who dealt with injuries last year. Matthew Boyd, who, while making a ton of starts last season, was a guy that wore down significantly as the year went on. And you could, keep Cade Horton is not a rookie and he's young, but he made a big jump in innings last year. So I'm kind of hopeful that the Cubs use the Justin Steele gap at the beginning of the year and his eventual return to rest arms with an eye on them being fresh in the postseason, because that's ultimately what sunk the Cubs last year is, Shota Imanaga had nothing left. Matthew Boyd, had a rough playoff sort of run and certainly rough second half of the season. Justin Steele wasn't there at all. We need these guys to be available. And I think the way to do that is by limiting their innings early in the year, and Justin Steele coming back can sort of artificially help that process.
Taking a page out of the Dodgers book where it's like, hey, you get injured, don't rush back. We need you in October. Right. That's what we care about the most, which is also why I just think that Zach Gallen still makes a ton of sense for this team. But before we go to those additions, to just build off that, that was one of my other ones, was the way that we see the starting pitchers ramp up in spring training is really something that I'm going to keep an eye on. You already mentioned the names. Edward Cabrera has never thrown on over 140 innings. Cade Horton really has just had one half season of Major League Baseball. Matthew Boyd far exceeded his innings that we expected last year. And then you had injuries with Jamison Tyone, Justin Steele, and Shota Imanaga. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of question marks with a ton of potential.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wonder if, like, the first week, would it be a surprise if we just don't even see any of those guys because they're just like, hey, we just really want to slow play this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the Cubs are going to be as thoughtful about, their the pitches thrown, especially in spring. The World Baseball Classic will be there for some of those guys, which stinks a little bit because they tend to ramp up a little more quickly. But the Cubs also sort of dealt with that last year with the early series in Tokyo, which was 2 weeks before the regular season or whatever it was, and that I think also probably played a role just because it extended the window during which they needed to be full power, full steam ahead, at least for a couple of the guys.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. You said you had a number 3.
What it's going to be is, I want to see Matt Shaw in the outfield. I was so resistant to this pervasive notion that he's going to play some outfield, but I think it's clear now that it's at least a possibility unless the Cubs sign another outfield bench bat. So I'd like to see him out there. I believe he would be capable. I think he's a good enough athlete. We've seen him at third and we know he can play second. So it seems possible, but I'm just curious to let's actually see some routes. Let's see him run down some fly balls. Let's see him, hit the cutoff man the right way. I don't know how much outfield we could see how much outfield he's had in his distant past, but recent past that he's actually played. And to Jed Hoyer's point, we didn't expect Chris Bryant to be playing a bunch of left field in 20, it happens, but I would like to see it. And I'm hopeful that they'll start him out there a little bit earlier on when there's fewer everyday regular starting players getting those reps. So Shaw in the outfield would be my number 3.
Yeah, it was up there for me too. Big question mark, but I think if anyone's capable of doing it, I think it's him. He's an athlete. He's got speed. Look how quickly he adjusted to third base. All the things that we've already talked about, which is a good question from Adam here. I'm going to splice in one of our viewer questions. Thoughts on Dylan Carlson, Justin Dean / Alcantara for the 4th outfield spot? We got to mention Chas McCormick too.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about those 3. Yeah.
So I'm sort of the belief right now. Obviously, things can change in spring if guys look less ready or more ready. But I think that one of Dylan Carlson, Justin Dean, or Chas McCormick are more likely and better options for the bench early in the year than Kevin Alcantara. Not because I don't believe in Kevin Alcantara. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. I still would like to see if he can realize some of his immense upside, which we know he has some of the highest upside, just his overall body frame, power potential, ability to play all 3 spots in the outfield. I'd like to see him at AAA developing and working on that and forcing the issue.
Yeah.
Whereas although he might fit and may even be the best option as a right-handed, outfield bench bat that can play all 3 outfield spots, because the Cubs will need a backup center fielder, right? I don't like that he won't play that often. And while I would change my tune on that in the second half of the year and heading into the playoffs, when you just want the best guys on the team in the big leagues, for the first half, let him go back to AAA, which he didn't really dominate last year anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what he can do, develop there, take your time, become a starting caliber outfielder, because guess what? Next year, when Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki are both free agents, there might be an opportunity. And I would hate to delay that development in service of bench, a couple bench bats, pinch hit at bats or starts early in the year. Again, later in the season, in the postseason, God bless.
I 100% agree. I actually had one of our viewers DM me and we had a conversation about this because he was like, hey, what do you think about the 4th outfield spot? And he put Alcantara in there. And I was like, honestly, I think he's last in line because he hasn't proven himself at AAA. He goes through these streaks where you're like, there's the guy we traded Rizzo for. And then he's just kind of like striking out, whiffing at everything, and not making a whole lot of noise on the base paths or in the outfield, from my understanding, without watching all the games. But I just think there's so much more value for him to continue to develop down there, and maybe increase his value in case a Dylan Carlson or a Chas McCormick do pan out. Then you've got a really nice trade chip at the trade deadline.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. All right. I have a couple others, and I want to ask you if I miss anything after these. But what about any additions that you see before the start of the season?
Yeah, I think. Well, so we mentioned Zach Gallen, and I'm kind of holding out hope. I don't have any inside information that no one else does, but I think it's been clear that the Cubs have had some interest in him throughout the offseason. They fake signed him in late November, if you remember that report, or maybe November or December. That was pretty fun. Zach Gallen was one of the guys that, before the Cubs had returned Shota Imanaga on the qualifying offer, that I really loved as the second starting pitcher addition, because I really think that people sleep on him so much right now, despite having an incredible career before last year, and then a pretty strong finish to the season. I mean, this is a guy who, had he hit free agency last winter, probably gets a $200 million deal. He just had a really bad year. That happens. His upside is still there. Now, Shota Imanaga fills a sort of similar void on the team, which is like, yeah, he's got this upside, but it was a down year. Let's see what we got. I still think they can get him and should try. Miguel Andujar is the other guy who kind of fits a lot of different ways. Good against left-handed pitching in particular. Can play infield, outfield if you need him to. I think that's a guy that the Cubs would consider adding. And honestly, I don't want to be too optimistic, but just based on the way that the Cubs have pushed their chips in for this offseason, and knowing the way that Jed and Carter operate, which is, yes, they're reserved and slow to the trigger most of the times, but when they do push in, it's sort of because they believe in that particular roster, and that's when they're willing to do a little bit more, go above the luxury tax threshold, etc. So I do think one of Gallen or Andujar could make sense. It just will be hard for me to believe that Gallen's not going to get a better offer from the Diamondbacks, who won't have to give up a draft pick in the IFA bonus pool by signing him. He's a qualified free agent, because he should be really looking for a deal with either a one-year deal or a multi-year deal with an opt-out after the first year. If I was him, that's what I would be looking for. And I don't know if that's going to make sense for the Cubs, who have seemed to prefer opt-outs after the second year. But those are the two biggest impact guys. I'm sure there are some relievers out there that we don't know about they could add, but I think Andujar or Gallen would be the last of the big additions, if any.
I agree. I think that Gallen does deserve a better contract, but then again, I thought that Eugenio Suarez deserved a better contract too, and look what he got. Just fantastic that he's going to be back at Wrigley 6 or 7 times again this year. So yeah. Hey, I want to get to my last storyline and hear any additional ones that you have, and then get to fan questions. But before we do, let's hear from our sponsor. Hey, let's take a quick break to let you know that one way you can support our show is by taking control of your health. Guys, as you know, I love Avocare products. It helped me kick an energy drink habit. It helped me lose weight, build muscle. But did you also know that pro athletes use these products? This is actually one of the reasons why I trusted Avocare products back in 2012, was because I saw Drew Brees, Jason Witten, and other NFL players using the products. And even some former Cubs foes like Ke'Bryan Hayes and Colton Wong use the products. This is why I've religiously used them every day since 2012, and I'm going to give you a link to my favorite product for 15% off. It's called Spark. Just pour it in your drink, tastes great, and it's clean energy for 5 hours with no crash. The link is down in the description. Again, this goes towards helping support our show, so thank you very much, and I know you're going to love it just as much as I do. And I'm telling you guys, I really do use this stuff every single day. Every time you see me drinking out of this cup, it's usually that. Especially Michael and I were talking about it before we went live here. Having a 3-year-old and a close to 1-year-old, there's not many good sleep nights. So I need my energy. So if you guys want that, go get it down in the description below. Michael, before I share my last one, what did I miss that you believe is going to be another spring training storyline, if anything?
Here's what I'm gonna guess is going to happen. I'm gonna guess that Pete Crow Armstrong has a horrendous spring training offensive performance, and everyone freaks out, and it's not gonna matter I'm not saying he's going to be the guy he was in the second half of 2024, first half of 2025 forever. Probably not. That was MVP level performance, and he's obviously capable of it, but whether or not he gets there is a different story. But I just know for a fact everyone's going to forget that the stats you put up in spring training do not matter. Yeah. And everyone's already on like a hair trigger with PCA because they're so nervous about him being that, less than average offensive bat he was in the second half of the season. That's my guess about what's going to happen.
I like that take. And, you and I both know, even though we say spring training doesn't matter, we're going to still put way too much emphasis on results.
Every year.
It's going to happen. All right. My last one is actually, I'm going to dish it over to a couple fan questions. It's about the extensions. Do we think there's, there's three guys I think of in extensions: Nico, Hap, and PCA. So let's start with Nico. Rojo Cube says over under 60% chance that Nico gets extended.
If you would have said over under 50, I would have taken the over, and 60 is like, that's kind of where I feel like it falls. I think it's a little bit more likely than not. I think the Cubs really, really like Nico Hoerner. You know what I mean? I think besides his obvious offensive impact, overall impact, offensive as well. And I'm actually working on an article right now that we sleep on his second half way too much. Gigantic leaps in power output and the volume and frequency of hard contact, pulling the ball in the air, hitting it harder, etc. I think the Cubs, I'll go with the over because I do think they really do want to get something done with him. The tricky part is if you're Nico, if you repeat 2025 and 2026, you're going to get paid next winter. Yeah. Paid. Like not everyone is set up for those. And obviously he could have a down year and then it all pulls back. And the Cubs do still have Matt Shaw, who's like kind of the heir apparent at second base. But I still think the Cubs are going to try to keep Nico. I think he's just too good, too well-liked, and too well-rounded of a player with some remaining upside that we saw again in the second half of the year to ignore.
I don't know if you saw, but David Kaplan was on our show and he said that his rumors that he was hearing was that Nico wanted 5 for 90. And I was like, 100%.
I saw your clip.
Do that right now.
Not only did I see your clip, I was talking to David Kaplan after that on the phone, and he was like, well, what if it was 590? So I'm going to stop you right there. I saw you on the setup, man. Yeah, and I agree with him entirely. 100%. Do it yesterday. I'm in.
Yeah, do it. It's not even a question, man.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's good.
Mark Pelk says Hap extension. I'm going to just add in PCA as well, because I know they started that conversation last year. And after the year he had, I just think that there's got to be at least some conversation there.
So, in a funny way, I actually would lump Hap and Suzuki together in a similar conversation. I just wrote about both of them over the weekend about what they might be able to get, because they're both the older corner outfielders about to hit free agency, right? I do think there's a path for one of those guys. I don't think the Cubs are going to end up keeping both. I don't think, who knows? And I do think there's a path for either of them. I think that with Hap, we sort of more or less know what we're going to get. He's a good defensive outfielder. He always ends up in his 120 weighted runs created plus range. Sees a lot of pitches, takes his walks. He's just a good player. I think would come at a slightly cheaper cost, and I think is a little bit less variability. Say Suzuki, by contrast, he's another one of those guys with like a big variability lever, right? Because we've seen his offensive performance reach that, it settles in the all-star tier and it reaches on occasion like the, MVP vote getter tier of offensive production, not overall player.
Yeah.
And so when you have a guy who like can be a 140, 145, 150 weighted runs created plus type of guy with 30 home run potential, suddenly the offense or the contractual projections are skewed a little bit, right? It's a little bit tougher. And so I think with both of these guys, we're not going to see an extension right now, but I do think that either one is a pretty good bet to re-sign with the Cubs next winter. Like that's where I think that will work. And as far as PCA goes, I think the Cubs would, be smart to try to get something done with him. I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think last year the extension offer was around $75 million,
It was around there. Yeah.
obviously he had an insane first half and a quiet second half, so on and so forth. Maybe that sets us back up in a similar spot, but it's not hard to imagine had the Cubs done 100 million that he might have signed and they would have had him. And then that breakout happens and you're like, oh, wow, we just scored big.
Right. Right.
With a guy like PCA who came up young and is a 5-tool player in every sense of the word and a true like magnetic personality superstar, that's the kind of guy you need to try pretty hard to tack on a couple of years to his existing contract, even though he's controlled for a long time. And it seems likely to me that even if he settles in as a league average bat, which I think is perfectly reasonable, he's going to be a very valuable player no matter what. So if you can get something done, I think you got to try really hard to.
I would love to get these last two questions in, but let's see where we're at on timing because I know you're tight on time. So at least one more here from Sean Hendrickson. Hey, Michael, love Bleacher Nation. Based on what you know now, who is a pitcher or bat you want to see make an impact that hasn't really put it all together yet? So like a Ben Brown type, maybe you put Matt Shaw in that same category because of the bat not putting it all together. Who do you think is your two guys for that?
For the bat, my brain immediately went to Miguel Amaya. I think Carson Kelly had a great year. I'm blanking. Reese McGuire wound up being such a serviceable backup catcher. I mean, he really did a great job. Miguel Amaya still has like legitimate starting catcher, all-star catcher caliber upside that he did start to realize. Remember, again, he was just like PCA at the all-star break of 2024, changed his swing, limited his leg kick, changed his approach and took off in the second half and started looking really strong in 2025. The injuries completely derailed his entire season. So I'd love to see what he can do with a full year. And I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if Carson Kelly and Miguel Amaya sort of switch by the end of the year, where Amaya is our obvious starting catcher and Carson Kelly is, I'm not saying it's going to be 80-20, 70. They might be 60-40, but I think Amaya could blossom into that guy. And as far as the pitcher goes, it's hard not to say Porter Hodge. I know he sort of has put it together in the past, but coming into last year, I had higher hopes for him and then it kind of fell apart. It would be really great if he can be his 2024 self again. I mean, what a huge boost to the bullpen that would be. And then I guess starting pitcher, I don't know. All these guys are pretty established. Obviously, Cade Horton is the young rookie, or sophomore season player now. Maybe Jackson Wiggins is that guy. But I would definitely focus on Porter Hodge and Miguel Amaya.
Love it. All right. Well, one more time, guys, if you are joining us and didn't see in the beginning, Michael is now a published child author. My First Trip to the Bleachers. Go check it out. We've got a link down in the description below where you can get your copy. I've got mine on my way, which I'm really excited about. So thank you, Michael. But hey, thanks so much for the time, man. And looking forward to seeing what of these topics ends up coming to fruition that we talked about here today at spring training. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for having me on anytime.